during the offering. The Passover of the Jews was near. Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at the tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple, the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it had been written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered, "Destroy this temple. In 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews said, "This temple's been under construction for 46 years. You'll raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word Jesus had spoken. Reading ends here. Mostly we're going to emphasize the Numbers 21 and Ephesians reading this morning, for we have a wealth of material. Last week we read in John of the serpent in the wilderness related to Jesus being lifted up in cross and resurrection. This week we read its reference, a serpent lifted up in the wilderness for the people of Israel. As Keegan noted, we have the green of life in the windows here at church. We have snake imagery throughout this church. Over here we have the serpent entwining the world as a sign of the fall infecting not only human nature but everyone. Look across and you see that green now transformed into the green of life, but still surrounding the cross. Go downstairs into the chapel and you see a direct healing sign with 2 snakes entwined around the cross as a sign for healing. Throughout human history, the snake or the serpent's a beast that takes on different forms and different mythical elements. This morning, think of the Roman caduceus that graces many pharmacies. Recall the serpent in the garden. In Egypt, the serpent was a polar symbol of both good and evil, life and death. And you get it picked up here with enormous depth this morning. We have the 10 Commandments on that window. It says as clear as a bell, and I realize all of you read the Hebrew, that it refers to no graven images, period. But here God tells Moses, make a bronze serpent and stick it up. Its form was more than a serpent. It was of a fiery or shining serpent, perhaps even a flying serpent, where we get the word seraphim for some of the angels around the very throne of God. But take just a moment this morning. Moses is told to create an image of the very thing that's killing the people with its poisonous bite. Use the opposite, use the very thing that's killing you for a totally different purpose. The thing that's attacking you can heal you. As we were talking with the children, we talked about St. Patrick's Day. It's weekend and this coming Tuesday. There may be some people here who have heard the expression, I need to have a bit of the hair of the dog that bit me. Now, I realize none of you have ever heard that expression before, but if people have had a bit of a night on the town, they take a bit of a Bloody Mary. to help face the day after a particularly tough night. This is hair of the dog that bit you. Look up at the image of the snake, and it will serve as anti-venom. Its copper or bronze sheen was bringing light to the dying, only if they looked up. Somehow, the vicious evil of the snake has now been turned into an instrument of healing as long as they looked up. I don't think it was an accident that the sly serpent, often a symbol of wisdom, could be seen as twisting wisdom in the fall story, that it can twist the good. The idea that you could be as God, perhaps have divine wisdom, was a lure for Eve and Adam. This bronze serpent apparently was kept in a shrine in the temple for hundreds of years in Israel, but in a religious revival, it was destroyed out of fear that it had become an idol, that it was a graven image. In Jesus, we have a shining human figure who drains the venom and poison out of our lives, in Jesus being lifted up in cross and resurrection. Jesus says, I will draw all people to myself. And in that magnetic attraction is also, it seems, offering the healing of the venom, the grudges, the hurts of our lives being drained away. If only we look up at Jesus Christ, the one lifted up. In John, remember, the cross and resurrection are always linked together by being lifted up. Jesus is lifted up both on the cross and lifted into resurrection life. That exact image was used in Ephesians this morning as well. Merely gazing up at the serpent was enough to heal the bites. Gazing up at the bare cross that combines Good Friday and resurrection is enough to heal the venom that infects our lives. Maybe in looking up, we also look outward, as are opposed to our fixation inward. I've mentioned too many times that I'm a product of the old Latin Mass pre-Vatican II Catholicism. Just this Tuesday, I went to the auction in beautiful downtown Shipman to see the auction of the Ursuline Sisters religious wear and furniture that they were selling in their convent. It was all too pricey for me, but the first thing they sold were crucifixes. I was going to get one if it was $2, but they tended to go for like $100. On the bottom of almost all of them was a serpent, because in Catholic iconography, the serpent is being crushed by the cross, because the child of Eve in Genesis 3 is promised that the serpent's head will be crushed. Jesus, the new Adam, son of the new Eve, crushes the head of the serpent. Now, Ephesians has been called the queen of the epistles. It's a dense letter, hard to read, filled with a density of images. But it uses the same polar ideas that we've just encountered in the other readings this morning. Basically, it says that all of us struggle through life as, if you will, a living death. That we don't live life as richly and fully as we can because we accept counterfeit examples of life and feeling alive and miss the rich dimension of life in the Spirit. It says that in Jesus Christ, all of us have a door open to life in a new key, a different level, a new dimension. We are being made alive, he says. And further, Ephesians emphasizes that we don't enjoy that new life on our own, individually, separate from each other, but only together do we enjoy the fullness of that rich life. He even invents new Greek words to get at the idea that we are in this together. It's a sense that we are being joined, not at the hip, but at the soul level. Ephesians continues. We are God's workmanship. We are God's craft project. Maybe that lies at the heart of iconoclasm, why there shouldn't be images in the Jewish and Christian traditions. Images are counterfeit for the reality of God's true treasure, true craft project, true treasured art object, human beings. Hear that carefully. Ephesians says we are part of the very artistry of God. But it goes further, that a product of that is God's utter generosity. The gift of grace, the gift of faith is God's free gift to us. Free gift. For Americans, that's hard to grasp because we fully believe that you should get what you work for. You get what you pay for. This counters that whole notion. But we do have some examples of it. People devote immense time and energy to their hobbies without pay. Indeed, sometimes hobbies are a money pit where we pour time and energy and money into them. People devote time and labor and thought in service work all over the world. And when we do something like that, we say it's done gratis, out of grace. Or attorneys, when they do something for free, out of the goodness of their hearts, they say it's done pro bono, for the good, for the general public good, without a dime being paid. Now, we Protestants have made a watchword about works, about a thought that we, in a terrible stereotype, believe that, well, other peoples believe that you can buy your way into heaven. We don't. And we're going to hear a lot about that starting in 2 years. In 1517, so the 500th anniversary of Luther beginning the Protestant Reformation is coming at us. But Protestants, in reality, often make faith itself a work, one that we have to demonstrate and prove about its validity or its strength or its vitality. I just did a community service for a husband and wife yesterday who had long ago moved from Alton, but their remains are being returned here to be buried. And the daughter wanted me to be very clear that they hadn't been to church forever, but they had a strong faith. Okay. There's some sort of scale we keep in our minds of what are the signs of faith. As Americans, we emphasize that faith is a human decision and action. Choose Jesus, we are told. But the crux of the biblical message, the crux of the Protestant Reformation, and Catholics for that matter, is faith's a gift. A pure, no strings attached gift out of God's abundant generosity. Faith itself is a gift. Openness to the message is a gift. The capacity to see this new way of living is a gift. Here in Ephesians is the locus for speaking of spiritual riches, God's incredible generosity to everyone. God's way, God's kingdom works on individuals at the individual level, but it also, Ephesians reminds us, works together. The social level, the congregational level, the church level. At its very heart, the church is often countercultural. And our culture creates an idea against grace and against healing and makes it a matter of individual disposition, work, understanding. In some ways, we're all Christian Scientists. And that very idea is always set against grace. We live in this new century where we've only emphasized more and more individual needs. Me, my work, my skill, my ability. You owe me. You don't deserve this. You deserve this. Our tradition, rather, is one of grace and gratitude. But as it's been transformed in our time, this is an old classmate of mine in a recent sermon says this: our faith experience has become consumed. I'm going to change his words now. With the demand to try harder, to be better, to be a better Christian, to be a better person. And then he adds, no wonder people get disappointed and frustrated. How do you earn something that's given for free? On this St. Patrick's Day weekend, where green of new life is all around us, we're reminded this morning that the gift of life in itself is a gift in all its rich dimensions. Lent can be seen as a time to move away from the privation of our selfishness and our ego-driven desires. We're going to receive communion soon. This little wafer, this touch of wine, contains a wealth of spiritual favor, a spiritual banquet. It's getting just a hint of the spiritual riches of God. In the old days, we also called communion a form of spiritual medicine. We indeed called it the bread of life, the medicine of immortality. What we receive here this morning contains the promise of life, rich, abundant, life eternal. We ingest grace this morning.